Hotep, Marshall, do Akoma House Initiative. Here today to discuss black men and commitment. So last year around Akoma Day time, or earlier this year, I should say, 2015, Nawash and I were in New York at the Brooklyn Akoma Day celebration, hosted by Yendi's Neferatum. Shout out to Yendi's. Thank you so much for having us. It was a beautiful celebration, and all the people that came out, and just the way you put it together. But during the question and answer part of the evening, it was a sister there, an elder sister, and she had asked a question about why black men are afraid of commitment. And it was involved with people were going back and forth, and I had said to her, I had challenged the question and asked something that I always ask when people say that was she sure that black men have a problem with commitment? And I think she was a little taken aback, and the way the night went on, I didn't really get a chance to express my real my position on it the way I wanted to. But essentially what I was saying to her, and what I always say, is that I question when people ask me about black men and their failure and their unwillingness to commit. Is that what you're really seeing? And I think that we have to be very careful about parroting things that we hear in pop culture, especially when it's talking about black people, because 8 to 9 times out of 10, black people are not the origin of that narrative. For example, the same narrative that talks about black men and their fear for commitment, it's like a one side of a coin. On the other side of that coin is black women are angry and not worth essentially marrying. It's better to go with someone else. Every other woman is more docile, suited, or whatever this mythos is that we're looking for in women as men. Black women are the farthest from that. On the other side of that coin is the idea that black men do not want to commit. And I always challenge that narrative for this reason. Black people didn't write that narrative, number one. And then some would say, well, oh, Mantra, well, are you trying to say that black men don't have an issue with commitment? Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. That is what I'm saying. In fact, what I would say is that black men definitely have a problem. But I don't think what it is that they have a problem with committing. And why I say that is this. I see black men of all ages, especially American marrying ages. So I'm going to say a 15-year window from 25 to 40, or let's just say from 25 to 45 is the years that most men marry for the first time, right? And in that time period, I see black men, even a few years before that, preparing to commit and committing to all types of things. Like, for example, I saw a group of brothers who were way past 25 commit to go across the country. They were on the East Coast of the United States, and they went across the country to do a 3-on-3 basketball championship, or a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. And they committed a year and a half in advance. Now, the winners of the tournament were guaranteed, I think, $50,000. They committed over a year prior. They practiced every week, 2 or 3 times a week. A lot of times they were not getting along. They were not seeing eye to eye, but they kept the commitment, saved up some money together, rented a car, drove to the other side of the country, stayed in a hotel together to go and be a part of this tournament. They did well, actually did not win, but the point is that they made a plan and they committed and stayed to that plan. People would say, that's not, I've also worked in rehabilitation settings for over 25 years as a counselor, case manager, etc. I've seen brothers incarcerated in penitentiaries. I'm in New Jersey, and I've been in almost every penitentiary with the exception of 2 in the state of New Jersey doing work. And I've seen brothers who are doing real time, because they committed to street organizations or to social nations or gangs, whatever you want to call them, and they did crimes, and they held their blood in, blood out commitment, even at the sacrifice of their own freedom. Now, anytime you would go to jail, I went into Trenton State Prison, which is now called Garden State, but back then it was called Trenton State, which is New Jersey's biggest prison, or highest tier prison, highest secure level prison. And I met with people doing 40 years, 30 years, and could have changed that. But because of their commitment to their co-defendants and the people they went down to, they've committed themselves to do a 30-year stretch when they could have easily changed that. That's a commitment. I've seen brothers commit to dreams of becoming an actor or a ball player, my God, or a rapper, to the point where they structure their entire lives to be in sync with this commitment, this idea, this vision. Even oftentimes when you can show them verifiably that the odds are highly against them ever realizing this commitment. I mean, this vision, but their commitment to it is unshakable. So these, and I could go on, but I think these are the examples that most of us could readily relate to or identify a black man that they know in those fields or those pursuits. So I don't believe that black men have a problem to committing in relationships. What I believe is the challenge, and what my work is showing me is the challenge, is this. If I had a drum roll, I would do it. Brrr. Black men have not been conditioned since they were young to value being in a relationship. It is not something that we are taught in our superhero culture, in our sports icon culture, in our movie star culture, definitely in our hip hop culture. Any of the subcategories that black men as young boys aspire to or identify with, there is nothing in that is telling them that a part of the black manhood aspiration should be to get married. So Nawash and I always talk about the fact that black men live by the superhero complex, where our women, and this is across board, across racial lines, a lot of our men, most of our men live by the superhero complex, and the women live by the fairy tale syndrome. In the fairy tales, there's all of the fairy tales consist of some man. Even though he's an amorphous man or a nondescript man, he might have a characteristic like Prince Charming or Shining Knight, etc. May not necessarily have a name. He's a integral part of the story. Now, if you look at the superheroes, yeah, you might have in the popular American hit superheroes, you might have Lois Lane is a little bit popular with Superman, but for the most part, the women are not vital to the development of the superhero. Now, it's a lot of cultural gentrification going on with the superhero mythos and all that. Not to get into that right now, but the point is that most times when there's a critical impasse between the superhero and his woman or his female support, he chooses almost invariably, almost every time he chooses to leave her or to sacrifice that relationship and to be the superhero. There is a message in that. To the young hip-hop audience, how many hip-hop artists are married and promote that? Now, the tides are changing now because so many of the legends are older now. But nobody is promoting that. We don't have, how many songs are about marriage in a pleasurable way, or in a way that is telling you to have an affinity to marriage? Very few. In the social order, on the streets, in the hood, on the block, how many dudes are saying, I'm aspiring to be married? There was a common term when I was in my 20s in hip hop, where dudes were saying, I'm married to the game. Any woman I deal with is just some affair that I'm having, but I'm married to the game. And so I could go on and on in movies. Any black hero that we aspire to, he's almost never married. In fact, I'm a 70s baby. Almost everyone was in the tradition of the Mac or the pimp or the womanizer. So I could go on and on and on and on. But we see even in our toys, in our early development, our first 7, and we talk about the 7 sevens. If you're not familiar with that, check out our video on the 7 sevens. But in your first developmental 7, which is the age 0 to 7, how many toys that are marketed to boys or created for boys include a wife and a family, versus the toys, the doll houses and the mommy and daddy? Little girls play house. Little boys play adventurism. He's a hero, or he's a fighter, or he's a warrior. My God, no less. So the point that I'm making is that what the problem is that black boys aren't being taught from early developmental stages to even consider marriage and commitment. It isn't even on the table. Now, when you combine this with the fact that so many of them, and I think in our reissue of Akoma Day, the current statistics are 70% of our male and female children live in homes with single parent, head by single parent households. So there's nothing in their reality, which is my point, which is telling little black males who are transitioning into manhood, through boyhood into manhood, to value commitment or marriage. Now, the real problem occurs when the girls who are being given the total opposite storyline, value system when it comes to relationships, are growing up and interacting with these boys. And so the narrative of black men fearing commitment or not wanting to commit, I think, is a misnomer. And as I said at the beginning, it isn't coming from us. And so the question then on the floor is, who is it coming from? And my quick answer is, it is coming from an opposing cultural paradigm that seeks to keep black men and black women apart from each other. So I'm saying a couple things. Number one, black men are not afraid of commitment, and my life and my work has proven that to me, against even logic and against their own well-being and health, mental health. Number two, this idea that black men are afraid of commitment didn't even start with black men or black women. And number three, we got a real problem, but the problem is the value system that we're being taught, which brings me to the culprit. It's a cultural paradigm, and it's an alien cultural concept. The superhero culture of America is not yours. The hip-hop culture, one would argue that it's not yours anymore. But even though it is verbalized or presented by us, I think most of us who are intimate with hip hop would tell you that somebody else is driving the car of hip hop. We're now, even though we're spokespeople, we're not the owner. Like, for example, when you see a bus driver on a New Jersey Transit bus, you know that he's not the owner of New Jersey Transit. He's just the host for that ride that you're going on. And I think most of the brothers from my era, the golden era and the foundational era of hip hop, would tell you that's what's going on in hip hop as well. And so we have alien cultural concepts, because in our ancient culture, we value marriage. We value commitment. In our autochthonous culture, in our natural culture, you're not a man unless you have a skill and have a wife. You learn some trade, that benefits the group, and then you get a wife. That is definitely not the value system that is being taught here. And so we have this great disparity of unmarried women, unmarried men. Some of the last things that you could get young men to talk about today in their pursuit, in their playing out of their life, is getting married. They not thinking about that. They not valuing that. That's not even on the table until someone interjects it, and then they either defend why they're not going to do it, and they say because they don't work, because they're looking at the models all around them and they don't see they work. Or they say, I'm not thinking about that because it's just not in their belief system. Now, if they find a young lady and they love her and they have a baby, then they start to entertain it, or as many of them tell me, I'll give it a try. But they go in believing that it won't work. And so, amazingly, they prove their own belief system, as we all always do. And so I just want to offer this to black women who I love dearly. You need to look at this narrative. Be careful not to parrot this narrative that black men are afraid of commitment. And then you need to really, really start dealing with your sons about the value system of marriage and what it means. But for all black people, what I would say is what I say 10 times out of 10, you need to return to your cultural value system, not American pop culture, which, sorry to say, my brothers, hip hop is now a part of American pop culture. It is not a separate thing as it used to be. And I think nobody who really understands that art form and that cultural paradigm will argue me with that. But if you do, you're going to lose. So bring that argument on. The griot style, the storyteller style of hip hop that is at the genesis of it still exists, but they in no way, shape, or form control the popular image of what hip hop is. So it's no disrespect to those great artists. I'm just saying that they will be the first ones to tell you that what is the popular, version of hip hop is not that. Black women, you want to get married, you want to teach this to your sons, but the best way to teach it is through personal example. And this is where your dilemma comes in, and I understand your frustration. And I understand why you parrot this thing that you hear, because your experience is you've been dealing with a man from that 25 to 45 demographic who for 24 of his years of his life, before he hit that 25 age, he hasn't valued this thing. There's nothing in his popular culture really reiterating and echoing and conditioning time and time again that this is the thing you should be putting your time and energy into. And then he comes and he starts to stand in love or build a love with a woman who, since she could talk, has been hearing happily ever after and buying toy sets and, Barbie and Ken or whatever nonsense that she's been force-fed since she was a baby. And so these are the two people that are in a relationship together. And so what happens is, out of their frustration, a cultural enemy comes in and begins to verbalize their frustrations for them and says, coins the black woman's dissatisfaction with something she should be dissatisfied with, as they're just angry and they're hard to get along with, and then tells the woman that black men are just afraid of commitment. And so when you look at what you're seeing, if your analysis is not thorough and if it's not culturally relevant, you take on this analysis and start parodying it, and this is where we are a few generations since the breakup of our families here, since the physical mass separation of the black man and woman in America. So we're going to say the late 50s, early 60s, up to present day 2015. And so this is my analysis. On my next video, I want to tell sisters that there are 3 types of men that will marry you. And you need to be about the business of finding these 3 types of black men, because they do exist here. And they are the best template, in my opinion, to pursue the idea of marriage with. But until I meet you on the next video coming up very soon, I just wanted to introduce this conversation, and I want you to reintroduce it. Watch this video with the person you're dating. Watch this video with a group of brothers. Watch this video with a group of sisters. Nawasha isn't here, but we teach this together, and I know she would have some feminine insight on it. But discuss it. Agree, disagree. Let us hear some feedback. Subscribe to the Akoma House Initiative, Relationship Empowerment. Just get with us. And until we see you again, till we dialogue again, as always, we greet you in peace in one of our many beautiful native tongues, and we say, Nia Akoma, Hotep.